Hello and welcome to Your Average Bear. I'm George, and in this episode, I'm painting the Astra Militarum Chimera. It's fully magnetized from a previous video, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it looks. Want to check it out? Let's do it. The first layer is coming on pretty nicely. I will absolutely need a second layer of the base coat, and I've laid down the black as well. The black is going to be an undercoat for my metallic paint, so I want to make sure there's a nice undercoat there. This next step is one of those that I make sure I do for stuff like this. It's adding the base coat on kind of the primary color. So it's the same color that we use for the prime. Now in this case it's a little different, so so I would have done this anyway, but if I had used the normal color, the bone white or the skeleton bone, then I would have been tempted to not do this, which is generally not a great idea. So I always make sure to give it a good base coat. No matter what primer I put on the bottom, base coat always goes on. And so I'm going to do this to all the the areas on this tank that kind of look up armored. And if you've seen my previous tank video, it was a wyvern. It's kind of the same color pattern. I'm doing the exact same thing for this chimera. And you want to make sure to get these little details like here and the underside of this very same part. You don't have to do an absolutely perfect job, but it helps to pay attention to these little details. They really do spruce up the look of your vehicle when it's done. And so I'll do the same thing with just little pieces like this hatch, this hatch. I'm going to do this door on the back with that same color. The idea is to just highlight certain pieces of the vehicle that look like they might be up armored to distinguish them from the general body of the tank. I try to keep it pretty clean, but inevitably you're going to make some mistakes, and at this stage it's fine because they're relatively easy to fix. You'll notice I did a little spill there, and that should be easy to fix. I just have to make sure not to forget to fix it, because otherwise it just looks sloppy. So before I work on this side, I'm going to let this stuff dry. The last thing you need is to handle wet paint. And you'll notice on this side, I've done a lot of the undercoating for the weapons. That is almost dry. I'm going to let it continue to dry. So as this dries, you can work on some of this. You can kind of figure out what you're going to do here. Or this guy. This is going to be interesting. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it yet. But yeah, while it dries, you can work on the other parts just to increase your efficiency. Or you could just let it dry, go take a nap, and come back and do this with a fresh face tomorrow. Well, I've got most of this vehicle painted up. Well, I've got the first coat of base coat on it. And here's where we are. Clearly the dark stone needs another coat, and I'm going to apply that, and I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to go with an even more watered down version of this glaze to kind of hopefully smooth out the patchiness of my brushwork without darkening up the tank too much. That's the plan. I've got all the bone white or skeleton bone pieces. I'm going to do the same thing. You'll notice how there's some kind of patchiness there with the paint, but all the major areas are based. And that includes like the weapons and accessories, so on and so forth. There's a couple of pieces that I still need to work on. And I went with a slightly different color green than I have in the past. I want to see what this looks like with the glaze. I'm really curious to see. I want some options where green is concerned, or the accessories that I put on my vehicles. So before I go into that second coat, I just want to talk a little bit about this guy. I have agonized about how to paint this cowcatcher, bulldozer blade, I don't know what you'd call it. And so I've got like the structural elements done. There's some black that'll serve as an undercoat for metallic silver, and the elements that are going to be welded onto the tank are the same color as the tank. But I don't know what to do about the dozer blade. You know, I could go with black, I could go with a metallic silver. There's any number of options. And I don't know, I haven't been able to decide. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick with a green. I was thinking about like a bright red or something like that, just to kind of catch the attention and draw the eye to it. But I'm going to go with muted on this one. I don't know if it's the right call, but I need to make a call, and so call I shall. So this is probably the wrong brush to use. I'm going to use something a little bigger. So I'm going to glaze this up in this green that I'm using with a bit of a border that'll probably be either black or metallic silver. See that detail here around the edges? I'll probably make that black or metallic silver. Either way, it'll be, the first coat will be black because I need the undercoat first. Yeah, I really hope this is a good call, but I won't find out until the green wash goes on top of this. So for all I know, I'm making a horrible mistake here. But let's find out. All right, here's my Chimera. I have added that second coat of base glaze, and it looks much better. Like I said, I went in and I did a second coat, and instead of using kind of the normal strength glaze, I diluted it quite a bit. So it was very, very thin glaze, almost a wash, except I didn't add any glazing medium, didn't add any of this stuff to it. So, you know, it's still probably a wash, but it's kind of somewhere between a wash and a glaze. The point is that application got rid of a lot of the brush marks, and I left this part of the tank undone so you can see the difference. So this part of the bottom of the hull has that second coat of glaze. These two parts do not, and so you can kind of see that difference. And so I'm going to go in, now that I've shown you, I'm going to go in and finish this. But I added that second glaze. It looks pretty good. And I did the same thing with all the bone white colors. The thing that I'm most, I don't know if concerned is the right word, but I am curious. This green is very different from the greenness I have been using for my Astra Militarum. And so I want to see what this is going to look like after I apply the green tone. This is going to determine whether or not I keep this green or I try to reapply my usual green. Now I'm just going to, straight out of the bottle, I'm going to put some on my wet palette. And I'm not gonna modify it in any way. I'm just gonna apply some of it. I am really curious to see how this is going to impact the way it looks, because the green tone, it always changes the green a little bit. I just don't know what it's going to look like. Let's find out. Now here, I do want to be a little careful, because I don't want the green to end up on my base coat. And I'm probably being too liberal with the base coat here, but I do want to like have nice pooling effects, because it'll dry nice and dark, although not as dark as it originally seems. I do want a nice deep shadow where I can get it. And so far, I like the change. I think it looks pretty neat, but I won't be able to know for sure until it's dry, because this does look very different when it's wet. So I'm going to do the rest of this just on the off chance that it works the way I want it to, because I suspect it will. I think I'm going to like it once it's done. So in a piece like this, it's less about the shadows on this piece than it is about just the tinting it's going to give the green underneath it. There aren't any details to speak of on this part, in contrast to that turret that has all those nice little details that are shadowed. There's not a lot of that here. These are mostly flat pieces, and that's okay. I'm just, doing this for consistency to make sure that I use the same green on all the parts. So here's the green that I used after I've applied the green tone wash, and it darkened up quite a bit. It's nice, but it's not as fun somehow as the other green that I was using. But you know what? I'm going to keep it. I do like a little bit of variability across my units, but I probably won't use this shade of green again, at least not for this Astra Militarum project. I don't know. Maybe it'll grow on me. It just feels a little. It feels a little dull. The other type of green that I was using, it seems to have some vibrancy that this just kind of lacks. And that's okay. I just wanted to experiment with it. It looks okay. I just wouldn't do it again. Here's this piece. This is the turret. Here's what it looks like with the green tone. It's all right. It's all right. Not great, but it's not bad. So the next step here is to start adding the washes. The wash is kind of the step that makes these vehicles really come to life. And I'm going to use my usual scheme of washing for this Astra Militarum tank, which means that for the bone white or skeleton bone type of undercoats, I will apply a bit of this stuff. It's the soft tone. Sometimes I use the flesh wash because I find it has a little bit of red in it, and so it kind of brings the color up a little bit more. It makes it a bit more vibrant. This is really, really soft, so it's a very subtle kind of a wash. But I'm going to go with the soft tone just to keep things a little interesting. Yeah, let's see. And so, as per usual, I use a very liberal amount of my washes. I like the streaking effect that it brings. But you do want to pay special attention to these little crevices. That's really where you want the washes to go anyway. You can see I'm going to have the same issues with this application as I did before in terms of the streaking. Trying to figure out which. No, okay. Maybe just the long brush stroke is the way to go here. I love this step of the process because it brings out an immediate change in the look of the vehicle, and it's going to dry a lot less. So when it dries, it's going to look a lot less dramatic, but it's still going to be just a huge improvement in the overall look of this model. So this is the part that I look forward to the most. It's when it starts becoming like my actual model. Here's our tanky boy with the bone white washed in, and I've applied, I want to say it's 2 coats, but it could be like 1.5 coats. Basically, before the first one dried up, I went in and kind of touched stuff up. Looks a little less patchy. It looks all right. Kind of grimy, and in all the right spots. It really complements the dark brown color that the rest of the tank is painted in. I really like this look, and I'll probably do variations on this, basically for all my vehicle models, especially since it means that I don't have to spend a ton of time detailing. Look at that armor panel, that little hatch thing right there. It is pretty well detailed. You can see all that stuff that jumps out. Look at these side panels. It's a huge difference from where it was before, and it required minimal investment in my part. So before I continue, I need to apply the same wash principle, not the same color, but the same principle to this dark brown. I usually do that first, but I really wanted to see what it looked like up here. It's my favorite part, just to see these armor panels kind of jump out. But I am concerned that it's already pretty dark. If I go in here and darken it up some more, it's going to look really, really, really dark. And that's really not what I'm looking for. I really want to just provide shadows on all these little edges without having to pick each one out and do it myself. So what I've done is I've taken a little bit of this stuff. It's the dark tone wash that's produced by Army Painter, and I mixed in a couple of drops of this. Now it's normally not necessary because that's what this is what that wash is mostly made out of, that and some pigments. But I wanted to water this down, so I added some water to the mix, a good 7-8 drops to this big old puddle. And the idea here is I want to dilute the pigment without it modifying its ability to kind of adhere to all the little crevices, because that's really what I'm looking for. So basically I'm making it less dark without injuring, I hope, its ability to act like a thick wash. And so that's the idea here. And since it does change the overall color, just hopefully not as much as it would normally, I'm going to make sure to apply it on every surface that has this dark stone color. But I'm going to be liberal with my application because I do want it to pull towards the bottom of the tank. I want it to have those shadows and kind of look grimy, but in the right spots. Obviously, when I'm done applying this, I need to make sure that it dries in the right orientation, because I don't want it to pull upwards. I mean, you could, right? That could be a design decision. You could have it pull upwards, which is kind of where all the shadows are going to lie anyway, so that may not be a bad idea. But all those details that I want to grime up, they're at the bottom. So yeah, make sure it dries in this orientation. So or at least maybe not in this orientation. Make sure it dries in the orientation that you want it to dry in. That's what I'm saying is, as it dries, it's going to pool, so make sure you understand how it's going to pool, and dry it in a way that's going to reinforce the look that you're going for. You'll notice that I'm not being very careful with this part of the vehicle. I don't care if I get dark tone on my tracks, because the tracks are black, and you're really not going to darken that black up much. And ultimately, these tracks are not going to stay black. They're going to be painted up with some metallic colors in the detail stage of this project. So I'm not worried about doing a clean job here, because I will inevitably work right over that. Did I just smack my camera? And as you're doing this, also make sure not to touch the drying paint. I've made that mistake before. It never ends well, so just do your best to avoid it. Here's our tanky boy again. I've got all the washing done. Doesn't look half bad. Doesn't look half bad. In fact, technically, this is tabletop ready. So you could, after this, take it out to the store, battle your friends, and blow up a couple of these chimeras. But obviously, that's not where we're stopping. I wanted to show you the kind of the results of the wash, of the darker wash on that dark brown. I think it looks pretty nice. So everything has at least one coat of wash over the base glaze. We're in a good spot. What follows after this is the detail work. Well, yeah, kind of the detail work. So we've got the tracks, we've got the guns, we've got this antenna array. I need to do a little bit of something here on this missile. I got to fill in that lamp, yellow it up a little bit, and do something with this cool little plaque thing that it's got on the side. So it's over, and anything that's been undercoated in black. So there's quite a bit of that stuff that's going to happen, and I'm pretty excited to get started with that, because it's going to, really bring the model to life beyond where it's at. And I'm going to do a combination of straight painting and dry brushing that metallic silver on these undercoated parts. So where it makes sense, I'm going to dry brush. Where it doesn't make sense, I'm going to just straight up paint. So I think for things like this, these guns, I'll probably just paint. I don't know. I'm going to straight up paint these tracks though. I want these nice and metallic. I've mixed up a batch of this stuff. It's the plate mail metal. It's kind of a shiny silver. It's shinier than I typically do, but I have been using kind of a shinier silver for my Astra Militarum than I did for my Space Marines back in the day. But I did mix it in with a liberal amount of this matte black. And the result is a very nice, dark, metallic silver color. It feels, at least on the wet palette, it feels a little darker than the gunmetal color that I typically use. As I'm putting it on this model, though, it kind of, maybe it looks a little lighter, a little brighter than I thought. It looks a lot darker on my wet palette than it does on the model. It looks almost black on my wet palette. I thought it was going to be darker than it is, but it's okay. I kind of like the way it looks. It's very shiny. It's almost a shame to put a dark wash over this stuff, but almost. And now that I see this paint in action, this particular blend, I think I'm going to go straight with like straight painting as opposed to dry brushing. I think I like the way it looks enough that I'm going to go nuts with it. In this detailing phase, there's not a ton of stuff to do on the tank. It's the kind of detail that the tank has for the most part is the kind of detail that that I use my washes to bring out. So there's not a whole lot of specific highlights or shadows. I mean, you absolutely could, but my painting style makes it so that I don't have to do any of that stuff. Primarily because I'm lazy, but also because I'm not very good at that kind of thing. I don't have the patience for it. And certainly it's a skill I should develop, but, also got to be honest with myself, it's going to take some time. And so in the meantime, I rely on washes to make my model look good while not spending a ton of time on each one. That might change as my skill level develops, but for now, at least Imperial Guard tanks, not a whole lot of detail for me to work with, which I'm grateful for. So the real detail work that's really left as a result of my approach is mostly on the weapons. And since I've magnetized this tank, I have a lot of weapons to magnetize, more than you normally would have. So that's one of the kind of pitfalls, if you want to call it that, of magnetizing your units, is that you basically have to paint every weapon variety or type that you've magnetized. But, that's okay. I kind of like this process, and it allows me to put in a little bit of effort in a place where it pays off pretty well, and where I have the skills to do it. So most of the detailing that I do on this vehicle is right here on the weapons. All right, here's my Chimera. It looks pretty neat, if I do say so myself. And this weapon is a little finicky. It's magnetized and it's supposed to kind of rest on that pintle, but it's a little weak. But you'll see that I've done almost all the detailing. On the tank there's not a ton of stuff, but you'll notice there's that kind of that little hatch that did give us well, not an Aquila, it's a winged skull and a little red banner there. You'll see there was actually quite a few of these. So these are little windows for people to kind of peek out of. And I didn't realize this, but there's a lot more of these than you think. So each of these little las gun emplacements on the vehicle has its own little window slit. So I made sure to represent them as little glass windows. Yeah. I think it's looking pretty good. There's just a few little details left, like this thing. This is a heavy bolter option for the turret. There's just some optics here that I want to include, but that's it. So I'm going to let this dry a bit more, and then I'm going to give it a nice little gentle coating of varnish so that it brings the shine down. I don't know if you can see a lot of the shine. That comes from the washes. The washes kind of leave a glossy sheen to your models, so the matte varnish is going to bring that back down and make it more realistic. And so when I get that done and it dries, I'll talk about the details and I'll talk about some of the things that I've learned. And yeah, so I'll be right back. I'm all done. Chimera is ready to go. Here she is. really happy with the way this vehicle turned out, especially since it's magnetized. Everything on here that could be an option is magnetized, right down to this neat little hunter-killer missile. If you don't want to pay for it, you don't have to take it, but if you do, it goes right in your model. Yeah, I like the color scheme. I like the detailing. I just like the way it turned out. I'm really happy with this model. I think I'm getting better at painting Imperial Guard tanks, although I didn't have as large a barrier to entry since I've already had some experience with the Space Marine tanks. But somehow these feel a little easier. I don't know what it is, but in terms of painting, they're very straightforward. They're very simple. You can dress them up if you want. I chose not to. Like, I know a lot of people will add like a little flag, and that's something that I considered. But I don't have the codex for Imperial Guard, Astra Militarum, whatever you want to call them, and so I don't know what regiment I was going to pick. So I don't have a flag color thing to display here. And even if I did have one, I'm not sure I'd add it. So one of the reasons I avoid doing stuff like that is because it's really easy for a paint job on these guys to look cartoony. Which is an odd thing to say, because if you look at the models, they're cartoony. Like, that's their deal. It's less the case in a tank like this, but if you look at other Imperial Guard tanks, they have huge weapons. Same thing with Space Marine tanks, and heck, even the models, the weapons are oversized. So it's a weird thing to say, I think, that the paint job will make it look cartoony when the model itself is cartoony. So I guess I'll put it in this other way. Because the models are not realistic, you can get away with a simple paint job like this. Can you imagine, let's say, like a real Sherman tank? If you were like into the tank modeling community, I know there's a big group of folks that do that, and they're amazing at it. And I watch some of those videos to get tips and tricks for my own purposes here. I can't imagine like something like this sharp blue. It doesn't look horrible on this model, but it would look horrible on like a Sherman tank or a Tiger II or something like that. It just wouldn't work the way it does here. And so I think the reason that we can get away with it is because the models themselves are cartoony. So yeah, it's a weird thing to say that you want to keep the paint job realistic-ish. I don't know. It makes sense up here. In any case, I'm learning quite a bit about how to paint these guys. I'm getting better at applying the techniques. There is a thing that I would like to refine. So you'll notice on the bone white, kind of these armor plates, there's kind of some streaking, right? It's a little easier to see, I think, on this side. There's some streaking. If you look at the turret, it looks kind of patchy, and sometimes that's okay. Like, sometimes that's a look that you want to go for, but not all the time. And if I want an effect like that, I think I want it to be way more intentional than it is here. Like, yeah, you can kind of get away with it because, cartoony. But I need to exercise more control. I need to learn how to use my washes a bit more effectively than I have in this case. But other than that, a lot of things came together really well. I'm really happy with the magnetization work. If you haven't seen that video and you're curious about how to magnetize, or even why you're going to magnetize, the short answer is there's no reason for you to actually magnetize. But for those of you who really, really want to, or just love magnetizing and want to see it done, check out the video. It's the one right before this on my Let's Build series. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm happy with the way it looks. Looking forward to my next project. It's going to be Imperial Guard as well. I know what I'm going to do. And since I know what I'm going to do, that'll be my next video, and I hope you want to watch it too. Have a wonderful evening. Be nice to yourselves and each other. Peace.